When you're living a life, being married to Elvis Presley, you don't really know what you're getting into, especially when you're younger.
Priscilla Presley spent half a century guarding the truth like a locked room. People called her Elvis Presley's child bride. But even that barely scratches the surface of what really went on. Their marriage looked picture perfect from the outside. Yet anyone paying attention could see the tension building long before the vows were even said. And when it all finally fell apart, Priscilla walked away with a smile for the cameras and a silence that lasted decades. But silence doesn't last forever. Now, at 80, Priscilla is no longer carrying the weight of protecting anyone's legacy. She's speaking with a clarity she never allowed herself before. And what she's finally revealing is exactly what many suspected all along, only far worse. So the question is, why did it take her this long to tell the truth? Join us as we uncover the hidden realities beyond the headline. The untold story of Priscilla Presley. Priscilla Ann Wagner came into the world on May 24, 1945, at the Brooklyn Naval Hospital, a tiny baby who had no idea her life would end up tied to one of the biggest names on the planet. Her roots stretched far beyond New York. Her maternal grandfather, Albert Henry Iverson, started out in Egersund, Norway, before crossing the ocean and building a life in the U.S. with Lorraine Davis, who carried Scots-Irish and English blood. Their only child, Anna Lillian Iverson, later known simply as Anne, would become Priscilla's mother. Priscilla's biological father, James Frederick Wagner, was a Navy pilot from Cherry Tree Township, Pennsylvania. He and Anne married on August 10, 1944, trying to build a family while war still shook the world. But fate stepped in too soon. Wagner died in a plane crash on November 3, 1945, when Priscilla was barely 6 months old, leaving a silence she would grow up hearing about but never remembering. His brother, Harold Wagner Jr., eventually took a very different path, ending up as the principal of an American school in Fürstenfeldbruck, Germany. Life shifted again in 1948, when Anne married Air Force officer Paul Beaulieu, a steady presence from Quebec, who stepped into Priscilla's life and raised her alongside Donald, Michelle, Jeffrey, and the twins, Thomas and Timothy. By April 17, 1950, her surname wasn't Wagner anymore. It officially became Beaulieu. But being a military kid meant nothing stayed still. The family packed up again and again, moving from base to base. Priscilla later explained that she never stayed in one school long enough to settle, and the constant shuffling made her naturally shy. Lunchtime became the worst part of her day. She remembered sitting alone, picking at food while other kids talked in circles she couldn't break into. In 1956, things finally paused for a moment in Del Valle, Texas, but not for long. Beaulieu got reassigned, this time to Wiesbaden, West Germany, and the entire family had to uproot once more. West Germany didn't welcome them with comfort. When the Beaulieus arrived, they squeezed into the Helene Hotel, and after 3 months, the bill made it clear they couldn't stay. They searched for anything they could afford and ended up in a large, old apartment in a building that had seen a lot of life long before World War I. Only after moving in did they learn something they never would have guessed. The building doubled as a brothel, but housing was scarce. Choices were slim, and with the military schedule pushing them along, they stayed. It was in that very Germany, amid the strange new surroundings and military routines, that Priscilla's life took a fateful turn. Priscilla Presley's messy marriage with the king of pop. Priscilla's story with Elvis didn't begin with fairy tale promises. It started on September 13, 1959, when she was a quiet 14-year-old stepping into a party at his rented villa in Bad Nauheim, West Germany, not knowing her life was about to take a turn that would follow her forever. She was introduced by Curry Grant, a U.S. Air Force officer, and something about her caught Elvis's attention instantly. Their conversations stretched from one meeting to another until he eventually pulled her upstairs during an early visit, away from the noise, and opened up about losing his mother, Gladys, just a year before. When she walked out that night, he kissed her goodbye, a kiss she would later remember as her first real one. By the fourth date, her father stepped in, demanding to meet the man who was suddenly taking up so much space in his daughter's world. Elvis arrived in his army uniform, his father standing beside him, listening carefully as Priscilla's parents laid out every rule for future visits: transportation, curfews, structure. He agreed to all of it, and that gave the relationship room to continue until he finally left West Germany on March 2, 1960. When he left, Priscilla fell into a kind of fog. She shut herself in her room for 2 days, unable to sleep or eat, and when she returned to school, reporters swarmed her with questions, asking whether he'd called, telling her Nancy Sinatra met him at the airport. It fed the fear that she had been nothing more than a chapter in his overseas life. Then, 21 days later, the phone rang at dawn. From that moment on, the calls came whenever they came. Soft reminders that she hadn't imagined their connection, even if the silence between them sometimes stretched for weeks. By February 1962, Elvis reached out again after months of nothing and asked her to visit him in Los Angeles. She doubted her father would even consider it, but Elvis called repeatedly, promising to follow any rule they set, waiting until her summer break, providing a first-class round-trip ticket, writing a full itinerary, arranging constant chaperoning, and guaranteeing daily letters home. She counted down each day until she arrived, and when she did, Joe Esposito picked her up and drove her to Elvis's house. But almost immediately, Elvis broke the agreement by taking her to Las Vegas. To keep her parents from finding out, she pre-wrote letters and had them mailed from Los Angeles while she was gone. Vegas pulled her deeper into his lifestyle. Long nights, sleeping during the day, and eventually leaning on amphetamines and sleeping pills just to keep up. After her Christmas visit, her parents agreed to let her move permanently to Memphis in March 1963, 2 months before her 18th birthday, under the understanding that Elvis intended to marry her. She enrolled at Immaculate Conception Cathedral School and initially lived with Elvis's father and stepmother, though she slowly drifted into Graceland life, spending days with Minnie Mae until she was living there full-time. She wanted to follow Elvis to Hollywood, but he insisted she stay in Memphis. Meanwhile, stories started surfacing about him and Anne Margaret during Viva Las Vegas. Priscilla confronted him, and he brushed it off as publicity, warning her not to trust the press. Over the years, he had other romantic entanglements with co-stars, all of which he denied the same way. She did get to visit him on set from time to time, but the trips were quick, controlled, and never quite enough to quiet her doubts. Right before Christmas 1966, Elvis proposed. Some suggested the timing came from Colonel Tom Parker, reminding him about RCA's morals clause. In later interviews, Priscilla said they were comfortable living together, but knew people wouldn't accept it publicly. Accounts differed. Some around Elvis claimed he felt cornered. Others swore he was excited. But Priscilla accepted and fell into the momentum of the moment. In her memoir, she wrote that Elvis was affectionate, but insisted they wait until marriage for intercourse, explaining that he wanted to save the actual experience for later, though he made it clear they could do everything but that. She maintained that she was a virgin on their wedding night, though biographer Suzanne Finstad challenged that, claiming the two had already crossed that line in Germany. They married on May 1, 1967, in an 8-minute ceremony at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, followed by a press conference and a $10,000 breakfast reception packed with representatives from MGM, RCA, and the William Morris Agency. The wedding left a bitter taste for some of Elvis's closest friends who weren't invited. And even though Parker took most of the blame, the resentment lingered. Their honeymoon in Palm Springs didn't last long. They were back in Memphis by May 4th, tucked away at a private ranch for 3 weeks before hosting a second reception at Graceland for everyone left out of the first one. Soon after, Priscilla learned she was pregnant. She worried the timing might disrupt the new closeness they'd finally found and even considered an abortion, but ultimately went through with it. Lisa Marie Presley was born 9 months to the day after their wedding. While Elvis was filming Live a Little, Love a Little in 1968, Priscilla started taking private dance lessons and briefly fell into an affair with her instructor, someone she called Mark in her memoir. She later regretted it, but at the time the distance between her and Elvis was already widening. His 1968 TV special revived his career, and suddenly he was everywhere, touring, performing in Vegas, barely home. Priscilla stayed back with their daughter, trying to keep herself occupied. Elvis encouraged her to take karate, and in 1972, she met instructor Mike Stone at one of his shows. That connection was intense, and she eventually entered a full-blown affair. She wrote that she still loved Elvis deeply, but knew she had to choose her own path. Her memoir described a moment when Elvis summoned her to his hotel suite and forcefully made love to her, telling her this was how a real man treated his woman. Years later, she admitted she regretted the wording, calling it an exaggeration born from emotion, but the core of her feelings stayed the same. She felt unseen, unfulfilled, and emotionally starved. She remembered Elvis telling her that he couldn't make love to a woman who had a child. A comment that cut deeper than he realized. She said she started doubting herself as a woman, her needs, her worth, everything, on loose. Women years later, she confirmed they did sleep together after Lisa Marie's birth, but the damage in between had already taken its toll. The couple separated on February 24, 1972, and filed for legal separation that July. Elvis filed for divorce on his 38th birthday to shield Priscilla and Lisa Marie from unnecessary attention, and the divorce was finalized on October 9, 1973. They agreed to share custody of Lisa Marie. Priscilla received a $725,000 settlement, spousal and child support, 5% of Elvis's new publishing companies, and half of the Beverly Hills home sale. The initial offer had been far lower, but after consulting new lawyers, she renegotiated, knowing Elvis could afford far more. And even after everything, when they walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, it was clear the bond between them hadn't disappeared. It had just changed form. Even as she stepped away from the whirlwind of life with Elvis, Priscilla's story didn't pause there. Inside Priscilla Presley's love life, the men she loved after Elvis. On May 1, 1967, Priscilla Presley went from being the quiet military kid who grew up hopping from base to base to the young woman standing beside the most famous entertainer alive. At 21, she married Elvis Presley and instantly stepped into a world that didn't come with a handbook. Even after their divorce in 1973, she remained the only woman who ever held that role in his life, the mother of his only child and the person forever tied to his legend. And even now, all these years later, Priscilla still calls Elvis the love of her life. She never remarried, never tried to recreate the marriage she once had, but she didn't live alone in the shadows either. Her love life moved through different seasons, different men, and very different worlds. Photographers, attorneys, models, actors, and businessmen, but never another rock star. Maybe she'd already lived through enough of that kind of whirlwind, because their marriage, as nice as it looked, had its cracks. Elvis's affairs were openly whispered about, and she eventually admitted she had her own moment of stepping out. In her memoir, she revealed an affair with Mike Stone, the martial arts trainer known for working with legends like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. She described him as someone who unlocked a confidence she didn't realize she'd lost. But when she told Elvis, he spiraled into anger. His bodyguard, Sonny West, later recounted how Elvis, in that rage, demanded Stone be killed. Priscilla eventually confirmed in an interview that, yes, in that moment, Elvis genuinely wanted it, but the people around him talked him down until he finally backed off. After Elvis, her relationships shifted into new territory. In 1975, she dated Terry O'Neill, the British celebrity photographer whose camera had captured everyone from Audrey Hepburn to Nelson Mandela. Their relationship was brief, only about 2 months, but even then, Elvis hovered in the background. Reports claimed he would call at all hours. Interrupted by jealousy, he never really hid. Eventually, the pressure dissolved whatever O'Neill and Priscilla were building. Then came the romance no one saw coming, Robert Kardashian. This was before the reality empire, before the tabloid era, back when he was simply a well-connected attorney navigating a breakup with Kris Jenner. According to reports, he fell hard for Priscilla. But when he proposed, she told him she wasn't marrying anyone until Elvis was gone. Elvis, true to form, wasn't thrilled either. He didn't like her dating at all, even arguing it wasn't the best idea for Lisa Marie. After a year, Priscilla and Kardashian went their separate ways. He went back to Jenner. They married, and the rest became history. Her longest early post-Elvis relationship was with model and actor Michael Edwards, a romance that lasted around 6 years. They traveled, did interviews, and looked like a glamorous pair. But years later, Lisa Marie revealed the unsettling truth, accusing Edwards of inappropriate behavior toward her during her teen years. She once described him as sick, pointing to things he admitted in his book, including being attracted to her as she grew up. That same book also revealed Priscilla's hookups with Julio Iglesias and Richard Gere during the 80s, pulling back the curtain on a period of her life she rarely discussed. She later dated her hairdresser, Eli Ezerzer, for about 2 years. They were photographed together often, but the relationship stayed low-key, simple, private, and almost quiet compared to everything before it. Then came Marco Garibaldi. He wasn't a celebrity, wasn't chasing fame, and rarely stepped into the spotlight. They dated for over 20 years, ending things in 2006. They never married, but they built a real life together and raised a son, Navarone, who is now in his 30s and carving out his own identity far from the Presley name. While Priscilla's personal life had quieted down, her public life, on the other hand, took a sudden hit. Inside the explosive legal war surrounding Priscilla Presley. In August of this year, Priscilla Presley found herself pulled into a firestorm, one that didn't come from gossip columns or old rumors, but from 2 former business partners who accused her of something unthinkable. Brigitte Cruz and Kevin Fialco filed a lawsuit in Los Angeles, claiming Priscilla had pushed her own daughter, Lisa Marie, into an early grave to secure her position at the top of the Presley empire. It was the kind of accusation that didn't just sting, it detonated. Cruz and Fialco accused her of fraud, breach of contract, and a long list of civil offenses after years of working together on Elvis-related ventures. Their lawsuit painted Priscilla as someone who always wanted the crown, calling her a woman who portrayed herself as the protector of the family while secretly chasing power. And they didn't hold back. They claimed that once they helped stabilize her finances in late 2023, she cut ties immediately and refused to compensate them for their involvement with the film Priscilla. Her attorney, Marty Singer, didn't waste time firing back. He called the lawsuit shameful, salacious, and completely baseless, insisting the entire thing would collapse under its own weight. He dismissed the accusations as pure fiction, loud fiction, and said Priscilla wasn't losing sleep over it. But the lawsuit went deeper, stirring up the final days of Lisa Marie's life. Lisa had attended the Golden Globes with her mother on January 10th, even though she'd been unwell. Days later, she collapsed at home and died from a small bowel obstruction. Cruz and Fialco claimed that despite Lisa's request to prolong her life, Priscilla allegedly had her life support removed almost immediately after arriving at the hospital. They suggested it was all about control, that with Lisa gone, Priscilla could maintain a hold over the Promenade Trust and Graceland. They even alleged that in the days following Lisa's death, Priscilla declared, "I'm the queen. I'm in charge of Graceland." To Cruz and Fialco, it was proof of what they believed she had always wanted. Singer responded with a completely different story. He said Riley Keough, Lisa Marie's daughter, and the current heir to Graceland, stood firmly behind her grandmother. He called the lawsuit disgusting, an attempt to ruin Priscilla's life, and insisted the truth would come out in court. But the accusations didn't stop there. In September, Cruz and Fialco filed an amended complaint with even heavier claims. They alleged that back in 1977, just months before Elvis died, Priscilla placed a lien on Graceland that added financial pressure to Elvis at a time when he was already struggling. They suggested she exploited the Presley name for decades, demanded millions in 2005 for personal gain, and was constantly maneuvering to keep herself at the center of the Presley legacy. Singer responded by mocking the allegations outright, saying Priscilla didn't cover up Area 51, didn't fake the moon landing, didn't kidnap Bigfoot, and didn't have anything to do with any other outrageous conspiracy people could imagine. His point was simple: the lawsuit was ridiculous. According to him, Priscilla had actually been the victim of elder abuse, claiming Cruz had tried to take control of her finances, which is why Priscilla sued her first. Cruz's legal team hit back, saying the evidence spoke for itself, that Priscilla had provided none of her own, and that they planned to push the case forward. For now, nothing has been decided. A judge still has to rule on what comes next. But at 80, Priscilla Presley is once again standing in the middle of a legal battle tied to the Presley name, a name she's been connected to for almost her entire life, whether she wanted the spotlight or not. Even as she navigates this latest storm, Priscilla is finally opening up about another chapter of her life that the world has long speculated about: her marriage to Elvis Presley. At 80, Priscilla Presley finally confirms what we all suspected, and it's bad. At 80, Priscilla Presley has finally spoken out, and what she revealed is far from the fairy tale image most of us grew up with. Sofia Coppola's new movie, Priscilla, puts the spotlight on one of pop culture's most iconic couples, Elvis and Priscilla Presley. But instead of glitz and glamour, it paints a picture of control, obsession, and heartbreak. The film stars Kaylee Spiani as Priscilla and Jacob Elordi, known from Euphoria as Elvis, and it traces their 14-year relationship, which began in West Germany in 1959 when Priscilla was just 14 and Elvis was 24. The couple eventually separated in 1973, and it wasn't until over a decade later that Priscilla stunned the world with her memoir, Elvis and Me, co-written with Sandra Harmon, revealing intimate, sometimes shocking details from their life together, details that Coppola's film now brings to the screen. If you're wondering how much of Priscilla is grounded in reality, Priscilla's own words make it clear. This was a relationship marked by a disturbing power imbalance. She admitted that over time, she began to see Elvis almost as a god, and not necessarily in a flattering sense. In the opening chapter of her memoir, she acknowledged that her teenage romance with Elvis was far from healthy. She wrote that he taught her everything: how to dress, walk, style her hair, apply makeup, and even how to love him his way. Over the years, she said, Elvis became her father, her husband, and very nearly God. Elvis wasn't just molding her actions, he was molding her identity. During a trip to Las Vegas early in their relationship, he instructed Priscilla to dye her brunette hair a darker shade to match his dyed black hair and to wear heavier eye makeup to make her blue eyes stand out more. He even dictated what colors she should wear, favoring those he himself donned: red, blue, turquoise, emerald green, black, and white. As Priscilla put it, she was his living doll, fashioned to his exact specifications. Over time, she found herself absorbing his tastes, insecurities, and hang-ups as if they were her own. Despite this intense control, Elvis demanded Priscilla remain untouched before marriage, a promise he never held himself to. When he returned from Army service in the U.S., he asked her to remain as she was when he left her. Almost 2 years later, on her first visit to Graceland, he repeated the request. Meanwhile, Elvis continued seeing his previous girlfriend, Anita Wood, a fact Priscilla discovered when she learned Anita had been staying in Elvis's room just before her visit. Even as Priscilla moved to Tennessee to finish school, Elvis was brazenly flirtatious with other women in front of her. On multiple occasions, she turned a blind eye to evidence of his infidelity. When she confronted him about flirtatious remarks toward a friend's girlfriend, he flew into a rage, insisting, "Look, woman, no one tells me who I can look at and who I can't." Later, when she tried to pursue her own ambitions, Elvis issued an ultimatum: "It's either me or a career." Priscilla had taken a part-time modeling job in Memphis to earn a little independence, and she recalled calling Elvis to share the news, only to hear him dismiss it. "You're going to have to give it up," she remembered him saying. "It's either me or a career, baby, because when I call you, I need you to be there." Only after their divorce did she find her own path, opening a clothing boutique called Bis & Beau in 1973, and later acting in television shows like Dallas. Elvis's expectations of loyalty, however, didn't extend to supporting her emotional needs. She wrote that if she was upset, depressed, or seeking closeness, he would avoid her or dismiss her timing as bad. "There was never a good time," she explained. His jealousy also extended to her friendships with men at Graceland. While she developed bonds with his inner circle, including future manager Jerry Schilling, Elvis constantly reminded her that she was his, lashing out when he felt those boundaries had been crossed. Graceland was exhausting for Priscilla. She juggled school, late-night outings, and constant attention to Elvis, describing her early years there as every free moment devoted to cramming a whole semester's work into a few weeks. She confessed that the strain eventually caught up with her, leaving her concentration scattered. To cope and keep up with the demands, she began taking a mix of prescription pills, a habit encouraged by Elvis, to stay awake and study for exams, even after a frightening incident with sleeping pills that left her unconscious for 2 days. In a desperate attempt to pass her classes, Priscilla admitted she resorted to bribing a straight-A student to let her copy answers. The pressure of life at Graceland was relentless, and she had little time to care for her own well-being. Physical abuse also marked their relationship. In one instance, a playful pillow fight turned violent when Elvis, frustrated by how hard Priscilla was throwing pillows, grabbed her arm and threw her onto the bed, accidentally hitting her in the eye. She ended up with a swollen black eye and bruised arms. He even joked afterward, "Couldn't help it. She tried to get rough with me. I had to show her who's boss." On another occasion, when she offered an honest opinion about one of his demo recordings, he threw a chair at her, narrowly missing her face. Elvis's manipulation extended beyond physical intimidation. After discovering evidence of his infidelity, Priscilla confronted him, only for him to throw her clothes out of the closet and demand she return to her parents' home in Germany. Humiliated and sobbing, she later realized that the threat wasn't real. It was a control tactic, a way for him to keep her under his thumb while maintaining the appearance of dominance. The emotional toll was devastating. At one point, Priscilla even tried to get his attention by overdosing on Placidils, sedatives they both regularly used. She had prepared a note, planning to leave, but abandoned the attempt when she realized Elvis hadn't noticed her absence. Her anger at his blatant flirtations, mixed with her adrenaline-fueled desperation, left her feeling foolish and trapped. Toward the end of their marriage, Priscilla revealed that Elvis sexually assaulted her. In Las Vegas, he forced himself on her in a moment she described as unrecognizable from the man she thought she knew. This was not the gentle, understanding man that I grew to love. He was under the influence, and with my personal growth and new realities, he had become a stranger to me, she wrote. He explained, "This is how a real man makes love to his woman." The following day, Priscilla made the inconceivable decision. She told him she was leaving. Sofia Coppola's Priscilla dramatizes these events, toning down some of the more harrowing moments for cinematic purposes. But Priscilla's memoir confirms that every instance of manipulation, control, and abuse she endured was real. From his strict rules about her appearance to his jealousy, infidelity, and violent outbursts, the picture that emerges is starkly different from the glamorous public image of the king of rock and roll. Priscilla's story isn't just about heartbreak, it's about survival. She navigated a world where her youth was exploited, her independence stifled, and her body and emotions controlled. Yet, she endured, eventually finding her own voice, her own career, and her own life away from Elvis's shadow. At 80, she finally confirmed what many had long suspected. Beneath the fame, the music, and the stage lights, Elvis's behavior toward her was troubling, controlling, and, at times, abusive. Coppola's film now gives audiences a chance to see that story unfold through Priscilla's eyes, without the gloss or the myth. The Priscilla narrative is a reminder that even icons aren't immune to the dark side of human relationships, and that sometimes survival requires more courage than anyone can imagine. What are your thoughts on Priscilla Presley's memoir? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.